All right, we're almost right on 5:30. Probably not quite, but almost there. So, g'day everybody. We've got about 11 people on now, so it's about half of who we're expecting. We might jump straight on in and get started for our little presentation this afternoon on how we can build your own or create your own app without having to write a single line of code. This is something I've personally discovered just recently. Something I find really cool, really exciting, and I hope as we go through the presentation, you'll find it really exciting and find some really great uses as well. The tool we're using for our webinar today is Webinar Jam, and you should see a chat option off to your somewhere there on the screen that will enable you to write any questions, make any comments, anything like that. I can see we've got a few people in the chat already. We've heard from Lewis, Rachel, and Jim. Lewis, will the session be recorded? The answer to that question is yes. We've got it set in the background of Webinar Jam to automatically record it, and we'll be able to get a link up and share it out. And it should automatically send you an email a little while after once it's ready with a link so that you can access that as soon as you want as well. So yes, Lewis, definitely recording, and you'll definitely be able to access it again afterwards. One of the things that Webinar Jam can do, despite being a great tool, is it can freeze up from time to time. Usually that's somewhere within the Webinar Jam platform and your end as on the browser side. So if that happens, just refresh the page and it should come back up. I've got a live feed happening on the side here of what you're seeing, as well as seeing my own platform there. If I see it freeze up, I've got something called a panic button, which should automatically reload it without disconnecting everybody. So hopefully all goes to plan and the technology is nice to us, and we get through it without any glitches. So what we're going to do on the presentation today is, and hi Stephen, I hear Stephen jump in there as well, so good to see you with us, Stephen. I'm just going to share my screen here that's got our presentation that we're going to go through. So the plan for our webinar today, we probably go for sort of half an hour, 45 minutes. I'll try not to keep it for too long. We're going to go through a really short presentation just through sort of what is the whole idea of no-code app development, what are some of the platforms you can use, what would you use it for, what are sort of suitable projects, and as well as that, we're going to jump into one of my favorite no-code app platforms, and we're going to build an app right here on the webinar as we go through, so you can actually see how it's done and how easy it is. Obviously, with the amount of time we've got, it's going to be a pretty short or a pretty quick and nasty app, but you'll at least get to see some of the functionality and see how some of it's done. So refresh, it depends on, sorry, Christian, Gordon says we've got a nice roll-up. We do. We've got about 13 people on now, which is really cool. And good to see you with us as well, Gordon. And Jim asked about refresh being Control F5. So Jim, that's generally Control R or Command R if you're on a Mac, but depends on your computer is the honest answer there. Usually Control R I find works if you do need to refresh the page. All right, so let's jump into our presentation on how we can create our own app without writing a single line of code, which is what we're here to do this afternoon. I've probably met most people that are going to be joining us on the presentation. But if I haven't, a little background for me there. Basically, I call myself a social entrepreneur, a startup founder. I'm a life, business, and leadership coach, which is kind of my main day-to-day business, and a bright sock aficionado. If you've ever been to the Smart Hub in Rockhampton, you'll know exactly where that comes from. Just my tendency to walk around with no shoes on and outrageously bright socks. I'm the founder and managing director of Tough Holland. And Tough Holland has two separate businesses. We've got Business in Bright Socks, which is a business and leadership coaching practice for specifically social enterprises and charities and not-for-profits, with a little bit of small business work thrown in there for struggling small businesses in particular. And also Provider Academy, which is focused specifically on supporting people to build businesses that thrive and change lives in the NDIS sector. And then we've got Type 1 Technologies, which is my real passion project at the moment, which is developing Diabetes Dashboard, an all-in-one personal diabetes management center. If you know my background, that comes out of my own son having Type 1 diabetes and something we needed to use for him, and I'll go through that story a little bit more in just a little while. So a question for you is, have you ever been frustrated by a lack of app features or having to bend your systems around the limitations of the apps you might use? So think about things you might use in your own business or in your day-to-day life, such as your CRM systems or your project management software, and you just wish they would do certain things, and you'll find one platform might do a certain number of things that you want, and then another platform does other things that you want, but you can't find the one that does everything. And so what happens is we end up designing our business systems and our processes and even some of our life systems around the apps rather than the apps working around us. Or perhaps you've had your own idea for a great app, but you've had no idea where to start, you've got no tech experience, you've got maybe no cash or no desire to pay a developer tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the app built for you. Well, if any of those circumstances sound like you, then no-code app development might be exactly what you're looking for. Another example might be if you've ever just found that you wish there was a particular app that would do something you want it to, that you want to do, and you just can't find one, and you think it's really, really simple. So, I skipped it. Nope. So, a little bit of my own journey into no-code development with Diabetes Dashboard. So, like I said, Diabetes Dashboard is designed to be an all-in-one personal diabetes management platform. So it started as this quick and dirty private member-based site bolted onto the back of my sales funnel software. So if you've ever heard of the software ClickFunnels, that's what I've used in the past for running sales funnels. I now build my own funnels out in my own no-code apps, but ClickFunnels was my platform of choice in the day. And when my son, who was diagnosed at age 3 with type 1 diabetes, was getting ready to start kindy, we just found that the amount of information we needed to share with the school was just overwhelming, particularly for them, but also the amount that we needed to try and communicate. And so I sat down literally in an afternoon and put together this really quick and nasty membership site, bolted onto the back of my sales funnel software, sent them out logins and said, here's a platform that's got all of Levi's critical information. Here's some learning information for you so that you can break it down and refer back whenever you need and just make it less and less overwhelming. And so I sent that off to our medical team. So we're talking, Levi's diabetes educator, his endocrinologist, and just got them to look through to make sure none of my information was wrong and or that I hadn't missed anything. And they immediately came back and said, we need this for everybody. Can you build this and commercialize it? And so the first thing I did was I jumped in and looked for solutions to how to make that happen really quickly. But I didn't have any programming experience, like none. I can use the front end of software, but for programming and coding, no idea. And so for me, then it was kind of, okay, how do I make this happen? And I was panicking and stressing, and for me, all I could see was dollars. I'm going to have to get web developers to work on this, and where am I going to get the money to do that, and that kind of thing. And so what I ended up going down not so long ago was down the road of looking at a crowdfunding campaign, so that I could try and crowdfund the initial development, and then I could hire in some developers and pay for that. But I was pointed by a friend who was actually the entrepreneur in residence here at the Smart Hub in Rockhampton. So there's something called 100 Days of No Code. 100 Days of No Code is just a bit of a community, really, that's together trying to see what you can build without writing code in 100 days. It sort of is what it sounds like. And discovered that he's using the Bubble platform to build his product. And there's a bit of a typo there. He's using it. He's not suing them. Little typos can make a big difference to what you're trying to say there. But so he is using Bubble to build a platform for his own product, which is something called Read with Lolly. And it's actually really, really cool. He's building a platform where you'll be able to use your smart device, particularly Alexa. I think Alexa-enabled devices is where he's starting. And you might have, if you take the example of my children, where my mother lives 2,000 kilometers away, she could record herself reading a story to the kids. We could pull out Lolly at our end and using Alexa say, hey, Lolly, read such and such a story to my kids. And it would just straight away be the children's granny reading them the story. And he's building this entire app using this Bubble no-code platform. So he pointed me in that direction, and I realized then that what I can do is build this fully functioning product, or at least the minimum viable product, something that allows you to get into the marketplace, build it myself, and without any code or almost no code whatsoever. And so now I am personally building a platform, the web version, the iOS version, the Android version, and I'm doing it all with no code tools. There's obviously, to make Diabetes Dashboard do exactly what I want it to do, there's a little bit of what we call API connection, but even that, there are so many great plugins and things that I'll show you when we get in and have a look at the platform, that I can still make a lot of that work without having to write any code. So now, not only do I apply it to Diabetes Dashboard, but like I said, I find this no-code development so exciting that I'm launching into building a whole bunch of the apps and tools and things, from a personal management dashboard where I manage all of my own goals and habits and all of these kind of things and sort of manage all of my personal world in one place, to looking at an enterprise dashboard for a program that Startup Gladstone is running, an all-in-one enterprise management system and CRM in the NDIS space, and a host of other ideas. It's really simple. I mean, this Father's Day, I was given a dartboard by my wife, and what I was looking for was a really simple dart scoring app to keep track of scores, and I couldn't find something that just simply added up or subtracted the score and allowed a couple of people to play together without having to pay $10 for something I might use once. But the joy of these no-code tools is you could literally sit down in an afternoon and build exactly that app without too much trouble at all, do it without writing any code, and you'd have it for as long as you want it. So I think no-code is the way of the future. Obviously, there's going to always be a role to play for coders and developers. I mean, we don't have no-code tools without people sitting in the background writing the code that makes them work. So there's always going to be that place for coding and cryptography and all that kind of thing. But for the average Joe like me, no coding is the way of the future. And back what we might call then, the days that actually weren't that long ago. If you wanted to launch your own app, you'd have to come up with an idea, pitch that idea, raise some money, or dig deep into your own pocket. You'd have to hire developers, get them to do the project, wait for them to deliver the project, and then go through the cycles of problems they might have, and then you have to review it and send it back and repeat the process, probably raise some more money before you even start turning over any revenue. Then eventually you launch and you hope it works, and you hope it flies, and you've got very little control over the process. I think through somebody that I know in the Smart Hub and the long journey they've had to developing exactly that, a web-based app that's got a great application, but the time it's taken as she's had to work with developers and things overseas. Now you can literally have an idea, sit down, build it yourself, launch it, see how it goes. And depending on how simple the idea is, like I said, that idea of a basic dart scoring app, we can sit down and build it in a day. It can be that simple. So would no-code development work for you? No-code app building is being used for an expanding range of tasks and platforms and all these kind of things, from CRMs to project management, financial services, marketplace, dashboard apps, scheduling apps, social networks, both actually people building their own social networks, but also using plugging into social networks through scheduling tools and those kind of things, learning management systems, staff management and rostering, and these are just examples from a single platform, which is Bubble, which is the platform we're going to use today. So if we have a really quick look here, this is the showcase on the Bubble website. You can just see a bunch of different apps and tools and platforms that have been built on Bubble alone. So we've got shift scheduling app here, community for designers here. What else have we got down here? We've got an influencer marketing tool. Scrolling down the page, there's a crowdfunding tool. There's all sorts of things. There's another staff one, a professional network for entrepreneurs there, so it's very similar to LinkedIn. Ride split, ride splitting, cost splitting app. All sorts of apps. There's learning management systems in there. These things have all been built on the Bubble platform, and they might have a range of different plugins and things that have been used with them, but there really is this whole big range of apps and tools that are being built and developed all on these no-code platforms. So if we are going to go down this route and say, all right, well, this is great, I like this idea, I'm going to build my own app, what are some of the things we need to think about? And honestly, this applies when we're looking at any business. Is there a need for the app? Is there a need for the product? Does it exist in the marketplace already? Is there a market for it? Can you maintain it? Not necessarily, again, the technology behind it, but do you have the time and the labor to do updates and check and maintain and make sure it's scalable and those kind of things? And can you scale it? Who is the user base? Who are you building it for? And you've got to make sure, are you actually building an app for your end user rather than yourself? And what problem are you actually solving by developing this app? Anybody that was at Bank of Queensland's Business-on that we did a couple of years ago in Gladstone would remember we had Steve Baxter, who was then the chief entrepreneur there, and I've got the quote there, if an app is there, what is the, and yes, the expletive was dropped in there. if the answer is an app, what is the fill in the blank question? And that was, we had a lot of people pitching the idea of an app as a solution to their problem. And he asked this question, if the answer is an app, what is the question? And the key behind that is, if we're going to jump into building an app, the tools might be there and they might be really easy to use, but we still need to think about, is somebody going to use the app? Is there a need for it, et cetera, et cetera? Just like if we're going to start any business. If I'm going to start a cafe because I like making coffee, I still need to make sure, are there customers who are going to buy it? Am I making coffee and creating an atmosphere that my customers will like, et cetera, et cetera? And the same goes for if we're going to build an app. So looking at some platform options, we've got Bubble. Bubble is a phenomenal tool. It's best mainly for web apps rather than mobile, although you can do some mobile applications with it. It's not as great for doing native mobile apps for, say, your iOS or Android, though. It would more be those apps that are more just a web browser wrapped in an app shell. AppGyver, which is great for mobile apps, but it's a bit more technical and does require a little bit more playing around. Adalo and Webflow and MakerPad, all great tools that you could use for either, not ones that I've played with too much. And then Zoho Creator, great for linking different functions, but probably more if you're already using the Zoho suite of enterprise software. But Bubble I have found to be a phenomenal tool, and Bubble's the one that we're going to use in just a moment. Some of the other things we've got are some integration and back-end options. So Zapier is, I couldn't run my business without Zapier, and it's not just for no-code app development. This thing links almost any app you can think of that you use. It probably links with any other app you can think of using Zapier. Their integration library is absolutely huge. Again, I'll show you an example of something we've used in Zapier for this particular webinar, and what a great tool it is there. Parabola is a little bit more technical. It's a great way of joining apps like what we might build on Bubble today with other apps and the back end, but it's probably just a little bit, it's very easy. It's actually a drag and drop sort of whiteboard based platform. It's quite easy to use and configure, but probably just a little bit too technical for us to dive into in the time we've got on a webinar this afternoon. Airtable is a great back-end database and information flow platform. And then, of course, Amazon AWS, which you've probably heard of. There's a whole lot of the internet is hosted on AWS. And Google Firebase is Google's answer to AWS, and something that I've actually only stumbled upon myself in the recent times. And so a quick example of something we could do in this no-code world, where we said, Bubble, which I really like, is really best placed for web platforms, whereas something like an Adalo might be better for building a mobile platform. We can use a backend like a Firebase or AWS to host your database and your user credentials and all of those kind of things, your authentication. And then you connect your mobile app that you've built on Adalo and your web app that you've built on Bubble straight back to this same backend, which allows the two of them to use all the same user data and users to be able to move between web and mobile and all that kind of thing. And you can still do it all without having to be a coder or a developer. It's really, really amazing what you can do. So let's get into the fun part of why we joined, or why we're on the webinar today. And let's build something. And what we're going to build is something that's really topical for the moment. It's something that in application we could probably really do by going to Google Sheets or something like that, a Google form and Google Sheets working together in reality. But it's something that it's going to show us the functionality of Bubble and how we can use it. So we're going to create a contact tracing app that we could use for an organization that needed to meet contact tracing regulations around COVID-19. So we're going to jump into Bubble and we're going to build it right here and right now over the next 20 minutes, half an hour or so. So when we're going to build it, the first thing we need to do is define what our needs are. We need to figure out what is it that we need to do. We're going to understand our users. Remember that we're going to have users on two sides. We're going to have users that are the people checking into our venues, and we're going to have users on the back end, so our staff, our management, whoever needs to pull those records out. We also need to remember that we have stakeholders like government, where if we do need, we do need to actually pull out this contact tracing information, we're able to produce it for them. We're going to select our platform, which I've already done for us this afternoon. We're going to use Bubble. And then when we actually get in and we build the app, we're going to build out our data tables that we need to create our data, the pages that we need to actually interface with our app. So things like a check-in page that we can use, a records page that we're going to protect with login so that the average Joe can't get all the details of anybody that's visited our app and checked in, or visited our venue and checked in, and obviously a way for people to log in. We're going to build workflows to make the app actually capture the data and do what it needs to do. Make sure we're managing our data in line with regulations, and we're going to, if we have time, maybe connect it to one external power tool. We may run out of time for that today, but we'll see how we go. So with that, let's go and get stuck in and start building something. So if we go, you can see here, so to access Bubble, and when we're finished, probably later tonight or tomorrow, I'll actually send out a list of resources that you can use for anything we've talked about here on the presentation. But to get in, we just go to the website. It's just bubble.io. That'll take us home, and you can see it'll load up our My Apps section. So you can see here I've got a few apps. I've got a couple of different accounts. So there's Diabetes Dashboard right there. We've got the cloud platform, so actually looking at how we can build our own enterprise cloud like Google Drive, and my sandbox where I play around with all the different features. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our contact tracing app. So we go here to New App, and we're going to give it a name. Now our name has to be sort of lowercase and joined by hyphens. We can't have any spaces or any of that kind of thing, because it will form the subdomain for our app until we connect it to our own domain. So we're going to call it, let's call it GRICT Contact Tracing. What are we building? And we'll just come up with something there. Let's just call it let's just call it other, because we can. What are we building? Contact tracing tool. And we're going to build the app ourselves, but you could also hire someone, and there are all sorts of templates you can get and plug in as well. So we click create our new app. Let Bubble do its thing for a moment. The joys of now having to wait for the internet to keep up. Up comes the we're loading your app. A bit slower than usual, but I imagine that's probably because it's competing with Webinar Jam for a bit of memory on the computer. So it comes up on the side here with what we call our new application assistant. What we're going to do is this can walk you step by step through the new application that you're going to do. We're going to start with a blank page. It's just going to take out any of the elements that were already installed. Make sure that we don't have any issues with missing API keys or any of that fun stuff. And so what we end up with right here is a blank page. So here on the Bubble interface, you can see down the side there are all these kind of elements and things that we can use to drag and drop onto our page that becomes our app. Right now we're on our index page, and we'll make this our check-in page for when people visit to check into the app. So you can see we've got all these different things: text, buttons, icons, links, images, etc., that we can just simply drag and drop and configure on our page. We've got containers like groups and repeating groups and all of those kind of things. All of the tools we need to build dynamic forms, some reusable elements like our header and our footer, which we can configure ourselves in the background, but we won't do today just for time reasons. Now down the left-hand side here, we've got our workflow, which we'll get into once we actually start putting some elements into our app. We've got our data, which we're about to configure in just a moment. We can go through and edit all of the default styles for all of the different elements. Plugins, they're a tool we'll look at all of the settings for our app and all of the logs of any changes or any of those kind of things, which we obviously haven't done any of just yet because it's a brand new app. So one of the great things about Bubble is that it has got a massive plugin library. So almost anything you can think of that you want to plug into into Bubble, somebody has made a plugin for you, which means you don't even have to go and develop the code yourself to try and make them work. There's all sorts of code, all sorts of plugins in there for things like connecting login via Google and login via Facebook, or connecting currency conversion tools in there, your payment processes like Stripe, all of these things. There's just so many things that if you can think of it, chances are it can do it. Voice recording tools, video meeting tools, QR code generators, which would be great if we were going to go a little bit more technical with our app today. There's just an amazing array of plugins that you can use I won't go through it in too much depth. This was one thing with the plugin tool is, and it's probably because there's so many of them, is it can be quite slow. All right, so starting to build our app. If you remember going back to our presentation, the first thing we need to look at are what sort of data we need to capture. And so what's the information we need to get? So you'll see our app already has a created area for users. So, and it already has an email, modified and created date. These are fields in that database that already exist. So we're going to create a new field for our user, and we're going to make sure that we have a first name, which is a text field. It's not playing very nicely now. Let's go very slow again. Let's have another try. First name. It's going to be challenging if this doesn't want to play for us. All right, we'll go in there and select text. Hopefully every time we create a field here, it's not going to be this slow. And we'll create. So we've now told Bubble that our user needs to not only have an email, but they also need to have a first name. We'll go in and create surname. This is being very painfully slow for us, so hopefully it gets its act together a little bit. Text. And create. Okay, now what we could also add in here, which we won't do straight away just because it is traveling so slow on us, is that we could also add in an access permission type or a user type. So effectively what we would probably want to do is have at least one person who had the user type of a super administrator. That way that person could actually create other users in the account. Otherwise, we would have pretty much no way for people to create accounts for themselves, which means we wouldn't be able to get in and manage the data on the other end of the app. Because we could do that through the login process. The problem is then anybody can come to our login page, create their own account, and get access to all of our contact tracing data. So the other thing we want to create is a new type of data, which is what we're going to call a check-in. This is the database that's going to actually capture the information that we are getting in our contact tracing. So that's created our check-in. So if we think about then, all right, remembering we look at what do we need to do. So we need to capture somebody's first name and last name. And then we need to capture one of either their phone number, their email address, or their residential address. So we are going to have to sort of bear with us as we go through creating that, although it has seemed to speed up for me again now. That's nice. I'm glad it's done that. So we need our first name, we need a surname, we need a phone number, and we'll just call that phone. And we're still going to leave that as a text, even though we could make it a number. We're going to go in and what else did we need? Phone number, we needed their email, and we needed their residential address, which we'll just call residential in our database. Okay, so now we've got the database set up in the backend, and you can see Bubble uses Amazon AWS. So they actually host ready-made databases, whereas if you have something like AppGyver, you would actually need to connect it to a backend database using something like AWS or Airtable or Firebase. And so you can see here in the application data, we've got all of our check-ins, and there's none because we haven't actually had anyone check in yet, all of our users, but those database tables have already been created in there for us. So now we'll go up to design, and we're once again on our front page, which is going to be our check-in page. So if we think through the flow of what we want people to do here, we think if they were coming into an event that we were hosting, say at the Smart Hub in Rockhampton or with Startup Gladstone, they'd come to the event and they would scan their QR code and look at their app, and we want them to go straight to the form they need to check in. So let's create our form thing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab a group. And we can either drag and drop the group element across here, and that puts it on our canvas for us to work with. And we're going to go down and delete it straight up. Or what we can do is just click group, and we can come over and drag and drop the size for ourselves. Now, we're going to call this group, which we just go over here into the little configuration box. We're going to call that group our header. Okay, and we don't really need to fiddle with too much else in here. If we were going to work a lot on the design, we'd work with things like fixed widths and making sure it responded nicely and played nicely when we dropped between web and mobile. But just for time reasons, we're going to do it quick and nasty and not play too much with the design, just as much as, more importantly, working with the function. So we've got our group there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come to our visual elements on the side and select text, go into our group box, and I put in a text box there, and you see it comes up, and we're going to go contact tracing check-in. And we're going to go down to our style. We're going to call that a header or a heading. And you can see that it's already pre-configured for us. And we'll just call that our heading for the element. It's disappeared on us because I shrunk that box just a little bit. So if I just bring the size back out, we should get it back eventually. There we go. And of course, we could get in and center that and make it all nice, but we're not going to do that now just for a time. So we'll just expand the group a little bit, and we'll drop in another text box because we need to give some instructions to the person using it. So we'll just say, as per government regulations, please fill out your number, your name and either phone, email, or residential address. So now the person looking at it knows what they need to do with it. And we'll just call that our subhead. And we're giving everything a name as we go along, so it just makes it easier to be able to track things down if we need to make any changes, if something's broken or anything of the like. So if we have a look over here on our thing, we can drop down and we've got our elements tree. And so we can quickly find and move between elements where we need to fix something or change something along the way. So, and you can see there in our group header, we drop that down and the header's got our heading and our subhead in there. So now we're going to create another group, and this is going to be our contact tracing form. So we'll call that one group form. And then we'll grab some text and we'll create some labels for our input form. So this one will be first name because we need to capture that. And then what we can do, a great tool with Bubble, we can go and create another one and another one and another one, or we can simply click Control or Command, depending on whether you're a Windows or a Mac user, drag it down, and it immediately creates a copy of that text box for us. We just double click on the box, and we can edit that one so it says surname, and then we'll repeat that down the line for the other information we need to capture. So, phone, email, and of course this is lined up very, very poorly. We don't have it. There's no E spacing or anything, but that's okay. We're just making it see how it works rather than making it pretty residential address. Okay, so we've got our text labels there. Now we need the actual fields that we're going to collect this information in. So we'll jump over here and grab, well, from our input forms menu, we're going to grab an input. First one we're going to grab is our first name. You can see there it comes up with the auto-populated text saying type here. We're going to say first name here. Or even just first name might be easier. And same thing, we'll drag and drop those down so that we've got a field for each one of these things. Again, they're not very neat, they're not very tidy, but that doesn't matter for today. Now, you can see here, now with phone number, we want to make sure that the phone number is a valid phone number. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the content format from text to text numbers only, and we're going to limit the number of characters to 10 because an Australian phone number only has 10 numbers. Another thing we're going to do with our first name and surname is we're going to tick this box here that says input should not be empty. We don't want people to be able to submit the form if they don't give us the information that we are required to collect. So now we'll drag and drop our surname again, and we're doing it surname instead of phone number because we changed the format of the phone number box and we don't want to have to change it again for our email. And finally for our residential address. Okay, So now what we've done is we've created the bones of our form. We've got the labels there. We've got the fields there, or the input boxes there for you. But as you can tell, there's nowhere to actually click the box and check in and submit your form. So we need to now grab a button from back up here on our visual elements list. Button. We're going to use the default style of button just because we don't need to be spending time editing them. And we're going to say check me in. So we've labeled our button check me in. But if we go over now to up the top here, we can see this beautiful button says preview. Click preview, that'll open it in a new tab for us, and we can actually start to see in real time what our new whiz-bang app looks like. And you may not be able to see it there on the screen. It might be clear enough because of the size, but you can see there that name we gave our app, GRICT Contact Tracing, has now become GRICT Contact Tracing, contacttracing.bubbleapps.io. Okay, so you can see there that the style doesn't line up very nicely because we haven't bothered to play with it and make it line up nicely. But if I was to go through now and I was to put my name in, put my number in, I was to put my address in, and put in an email address, and then click check me in, nothing happens. And nothing happens because we haven't told Bubble what to do yet when somebody clicks that button. So we need to go in and actually tell Bubble what to do when somebody clicks that button. The other thing we also need to do here is we've got these two round the wrong way, so we just need to fix that. Residential address goes with residential address. I'm going to leave the typo there. I'm moving the whole group around. All right. And we also need to make sure that these ones, email and residential address, are not, we don't have the input should remain empty, should not be empty box, because remember we only need to collect one of those things. So we're going to click our check me in box here, and there are two ways that we can get to actually telling it what to do when we click this box. The first one is to double click here, and there's a box in our configuration tool over here that says start or edit workflow. Or we can go to the left-hand side here and click the workflow tool. So what we're going to do is we're going to just click the this bit over here, start or edit workflows, and you can see it's immediately created a box here that says when button check me in is clicked. So it already picks up that when the button is clicked, it needs to do certain actions. And so we're going to use this tool here now to tell it exactly what actions we want it to do. So what we want it to do when it clicks that button is to create a check-in in our records. So we go down here to data or things, and we tell it to create a new thing when someone checks in. What type of thing do we want to create? We want to create a check-in. And then we need to tell it, okay, we create a check-in, but the fields on that form actually still mean nothing to Bubble. We need it to tell it what field relates to what field in our database. So we'll go down here to our set another field, and you can see these are our database fields. So we told it, we set up a field for a first name, and you'll see it says first name equals. So we go down and we find the input box, the input box element, which we've called input first name, and input first name value. So now we've told Bubble that when that form is submitted, the input field of first name corresponds with the first name section in the database. So I'll just quickly scoot through, and we'll do that for surname. And we can use, there is a search tool at the top there that will help us to quickly whiz through that. So if we go email, they don't have to be in the same email in the same order as they are on the form, as long as the right field corresponds with the right database field. Residential address, and finally we're going to be able to finish off with the phone number. Input phone numbers. You can see where I've got the typo there with input residential address. If I was to go back to the form and change the, change that spelling, it would automatically update the record of that being what the field is called. Now, the other thing we want it to do is we want to make sure that we've captured at least one of the email, residential, and phone number. So we go in here and we have a condition that says only when, and we would say only when input email's value is not empty. And then we want to go or input phone number value is not empty, or input, I've lost it, so I'm going to search for it, input residential addresses value is not empty. So now what we've done is we've told Bubble that to only create that new check-in if at least one of those boxes, email, residential, or phone number, is completed. And the first name and surname we've already told Bubble previously have to be completed. So now, if we go over to our preview, and you see here, if we go back to our preview here, it comes up with a bar saying we've just updated the page. Please click to refresh, otherwise it won't work. So now I go through, and you'll see here, I'm going to I'm going to leave these empty and click check me in. I go back here to our data.
A few moments later.
All right, that wasn't a webinar jam issue, that one. That was the MacBook completely freezing up. So we've managed to maintain 9 out of 13 people when that happened. So thanks for sticking around. That was we had to actually completely reboot the computer there. It just froze completely, which is kind of the nuclear meltdown problem. So just give me a second, and I'll jump in here and get the page back up we were working on, and I'll share it again for you. And I understand we are getting a bit close on time, so I'll try and just speed through a few things and maybe cut a few things down so that we're not dragging on too late. All right, so back here, there's our app, and we'll get back into it. Okay, so what we were looking at before our computer froze up on us was just looking back at our app data, and you can see when we look at our check-ins that we've created that there's nothing there, and that's because when we went to in our preview, we hadn't completed one of those 3 boxes. So if I now go in and I go name, and I just give my favorite fake phone number so that we've got a phone number in there, and I click check me in, and I go back to our database here, and we reload this page. All of our check-ins, and you can see there we've now created a check-in that's got a name, surname, and a phone number, which is all the information we would need. And because it automatically populates a creation date, we don't need to have any fields around date or any of those kind of things. Okay, so a couple of things we want to do is before we go into actually how we can retrieve these records from our end, is how do we tell the visitor that we've actually recorded their check-in? So first thing we'll do is in our workflow here, straight after we've created the check-in, we're going to go to our element actions, and we're going to reset the data. And all that will do is if you've ever used and we'll do that for the group form. And so if you've ever used an online form where you put in your information, you submit the form, and then the form clears out, that's what step 2 is doing. It's just clearing that form out. Remember, Bubble won't do anything, or the web app won't do anything that we haven't told it to do using this workflows tool. So the next thing we want to do is how do we handle a successful check-in, and how do we handle an invalid one? So let's deal first with the invalid one. And if somebody hasn't validly completed their form, what we want to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to find the tool called an alert. We're just going to draw our alert up the top here, and we can do all sorts of things like putting in icons and all that kind of thing to make it more attention grabbing. But of course, we're trying to be as quick as we can, so we're just going to say, wait, you haven't completed all the necessary information. Obviously, we're going to be a bit more polite than that. Over here, what we're going to do is actually want that box to be red. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to remove the standard alert style that we could configure from our styles on the side here. And this will allow us to configure this particular element. So we'll go in and working really, really quickly, we'll go to a maroon and bold text. We'll come down to our background style, which we want to be a flat color and have a bit of a red tinge to it. Probably a little bit more pink. There we go. Now it's red. And we'll make our border nice and red as well. And we'll just make it a little bit wider and round the corners off a little bit. So now we have alert, and we'll just call that alert invalid. And so now we have an alert for if the form is invalid. We can go back to our workflow here and create an event called we go, an element is clicked, and we're going to call that when check-in is invalid. The element, of course, is our button, and only when those three things that at least one has to be entered with. So our email is empty, and remember, all three need to be empty for this to trigger. So we want the phone number to also be empty. And remember, so this we're clicking the and, not the or, as we go through. And of course, the residential address is empty as well. Okay, so now it will trigger that. We're going to, just for our own reference, we'll make that box be red. What do we want it to do? We come down to element, and we want it to display the alert. So show the message, the alert that's invalid. How long do we want it to stay there for? We'll push that out so it stays there for a bit longer. And now that's ready to go. Okay, so back here on the element, what we want to do is make sure that it's not visible when the page loads initially. And we can come to our elements tree and hide it ourselves so that we can't see it. And then we'll go over and test. Every time we make a change, we go and test to see what it looks like and make sure that it's working for us. And again, check our name. And we won't fill out those, and you'll see there it won't submit the form, and it'll say that we haven't completed all the necessary information. But what it did do was still clear my information out, because we didn't tell it not to do that, not to do the clear out step if the information wasn't valid. So the last step we need to do with this before creating our backend to look at the resources, to look at the information, is tell it what to do if we have a successful step. So we're going to create a simple group, and we'll just call this group successful. So we'll go group about the size of our existing group there. And we'll call this group, group C, which we'll select back over here in the elements header. We'll say group successful check-in. And just for a moment, we're going to hide the form so we can only see what we're working on. And we're going to go in our successful check-in. We don't want that to be visible on page load. We only want it to be visible once we've had a successful check-in. And then we're going to create another alert. It's probably the easiest way to do it. We'll draw it within our group here. Success. You have checked in. Thank you, and enjoy your visit, with a smiley face. And we're not going to worry about any of the formatting because we want to move quickly through as we're already at 6:20. So, and we'll call this alert success. And now what we're going to do is hide that and bring up our form, go in and tell Bubble what to do to show that form. We're just going to change the name of that check-in. So when the check-in button is completed, we're going to create a new check-in. We're going to reset the form. We're going to hide the element. So here, all elements, hide, and we want to hide the form. And then we're going to show the group successful check-in. And just to be double sure, we're also going to get it to show that alert because they don't always pop up straight away. So show the success alert as well. So now if we go here and we refresh our contact tracing check-in page one more time, and we put in our check-in details. If I could spell my own name would be very helpful. This time we'll put in an email instead of the phone number, and we'll say check me in. And there we go, success, you've checked in. Now I know that it's worked and I can go and do whatever I was going to do. And if we go back into our app and look in the back end, go into the data and ask it to refresh our check-ins for us, you can see that it's now created that second record. So now how do we, as the owner of the business, actually pull out the data of who has checked in using our tool? What we're going to do is we're going to go to the top here and we're going to create a new page, and we're going to call this simply we'll call it our check-in records. And again, for time's sake, we're going to be really, really quick and nasty how we write this one out, just because we don't have a whole lot of time up our sleeve. So we'll come in with our text and we'll create a header, and you'll notice we didn't put that header in a group, which we would normally do, but I'm simply rushing through a little bit because I want to show the functionality more than the style. And we'll go check-in record. That's what we'll call it. All right, so that's our header. That's going to look really, really rough and ready when we put it out, but that's okay. We're just going to drag and drop to make our page a bit taller. It really is that simple. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to get what's called, we'll start with a group because we want a container, and we'll just call this our group check-in list. And we'll get a repeating group and put it within that group. And on this repeating group, we'll say, before we scroll, we want it to have 10 rows, so they're a bit narrower, maybe even go to 15. And we need to tell Bubble what kind of data this repeating group is. So the type of content is going to be our check-in, because we want it to have our records. And so our data source, which we also need to tell it, is we needed to tell it to do a search for our check-ins. And so that's going to tell when it loads this page up, it's going to tell Bubble that it needs to search for our check-in records. And then we need to actually populate what's in these boxes here. So we're going to come over the side and we're going to grab a text box, and we're going to start with a date. And again, if we were actually creating this, we would put headers up the top of dates and names and etc., so that it makes more sense when you read it. But we're just showing functionality over style today. Now you see here in our text box where we edit all of this information, there's an option to insert dynamic data. So we're going to insert, we're looking for now I've lost what I'm looking for. All right, what have I lost? We'll start that one again. We'll drop. That's what we want. I was one row too low. So we want the current check-in, and the first column we want to show the date that the person checked in. So we're going to find creation date. So current cell check-in creation date, and we simply want that to be all right. There we go. Now once we make that a proper size, you can see it actually fills in that data all the way down our repeating group. So the error that I had there was I was trying to put it on the second row instead of the first row. Okay, so now we're going to copy it across, and what other information we need to pull out is we're going to want our report to be able to tell us their first name. So we'll change the data in here, current cell check-ins, first names, is that current cell check-in's first name. So just what we'll do is we'll do a quick check to make sure the data that it pulls. Sorry, we're previewing our second page, so I just reloaded the first one instead. And you can see we've got an error there where it's pulling the right date, but it's not pulling the right first name, which means we've configured this text box here wrong. So we want it to be current cell check-in, first name, And I think that was actually all we wanted. And you can see there now it's showing us the date the record was created and the first name of the person that checked in. It's obviously stretched out because, again, we haven't played with our styling. So we'll recreate that one. And we'll say this one needs to be the surname. And I've changed the wrong box, so we'll just flip those back into the correct order. And on this side, it looks pretty messy, so you could play around with these titles just to make it look a bit neater while you're working on it. You can stretch it to make it wider, etc., so that your data fits nicer. And but of course, we're just doing functions and not the style. And just because we've run out of room, all we'll do here is we'll do the email. So now when we go back to our records page here and we refresh the page, you can see there that it now populates it with the first name, the last name, and the email address. And if we'd added in the phone number field or anything like that, we'd get the phone number for this one. I put in a phone number, but not an email for. So now we're able to pull those records out to show anybody who's checked in if we get asked for them. One other feature we could do is we could have a date, put in a date search box from over here. We've got it a date, time, or picker. So we put in a date, time, or picker, and we'll actually do a second one of those. And then what we could do is to actually tell our repeating group that when it searches for check-ins, we can add a constraint and say that the created date is equal to or after our first date picker's date. And then also that we want it to be equal to or before our second date picker's date. And now what we've done is tell it to only show us the records within the date range that we've selected. So when we go back here, it should now have our date range choosers there, but no other data. But now if I go and I say, show me the data from Sunday through to Wednesday, suddenly my records appear. And so we've just told Bubble there now to actually pull out only the records within the date range we choose. Now, if we had more time, what we could also do is we could go in and tell it to automatically delete any data that is 56 days old or older, because here in Queensland, we only keep contact tracing data for 56 days. So we could go in and actually tell it to do that either using particular workflow tools or to be a little bit neater, plugging it into something like Google Firebase and using that as our data storage. So one last thing we do is we want to create a pop-up over the top of this one. And this is going to be our login pop-up. And what we might actually do, just for sake of time, is we'll use one we wouldn't use if we were doing this, which is a reusable element that already exists within the thing that's got it pre-configured and ready to go. And the reason we wouldn't normally use that is because it's got sign up or login options. We simply want it to log in, but we're just using pre-configured stuff really quickly. So again, now we go in and up here in our reusable elements, we'll find the pop-up and tell it what to do. So we would tell it to sign up, and I'm not going to go and configure this just for time's sake, because I know we are getting on for time. We would go in and set up our workflow and tell it when this, you can see here it's pre-populated all the elements it could do anything with. So we would click when the button is signed up, it would create a user, sign the user up, hide the pop-up, and away it goes. When the login button is clicked, it would log the user in and hop up. And then what we could do is tell the page by going back to our check-in records page and back to our workflow, is that if the user is logged out, we want it to go down to our elements. We would say hide the check-in list group, and we would ask it to show the sign up or login pop-up. So now if we go here and we refresh the page, it should, if everything works well, not allow me to see the records because I'm not logged in. There we go. And so now I would have to sign up as a user, and we'll get LastPass to create a groovy password for me really quickly. Sign up. We don't want to save that password. And that should sign me up and log me straight in. Nope, it didn't, because I didn't tell it to log me in. So refresh the page. So once again, Bubble won't do anything that you don't tell it to do. Now it's got me logged in, and I can go in and search my records. Now, again, with more time on our hands, what we would do there is we would actually go in and configure that login a little bit better. We would have certain different types of user records. We would actually turn off the sign up function so that somebody couldn't sign up themselves and see the data. Instead, we would create another user type and create an admin page where an administrator could get in and configure all of those user permissions, user access, all of those kind of things. But again, we're already at 6:30 now, so you know it would take a bit longer than where we're at to get that done. So hopefully that showed you a bit of what we could do. Probably not as much as I'd hope we could get done in the hour, but it doesn't help when everything shuts down on you. One last thing I do want to show you, and I'm going to create a little link here for you, is something that we call, and I did have this preloaded before the computer froze, something called Secret. And Join Secret, or Secret, is how you can get access to thousands and thousands of dollars of bonuses and free or tools and things for very little money up front. So question there, are we demonstrating the free version? So Bubble is free to create your app, and then it has different pricing depending on what you want it to do. So if we go in here to our app settings, you can see here we're currently on the free plan, or the hobby plan, which is their free plan. And what Bubble does is it prices you based on each individual app. So if I was to go to the personal plan, you'll see all the different things I can do. So I can take the Bubble's branding off. I can use my own domain. I can customize my SEO codes and use all sorts of different plugins. So you can see all the different, and that would go to $29 billed monthly, or an annual price. And so that's done at it's actually done on an app by app basis. And one of the things in the secret offer that you can get by clicking the button there on the webinar is there's actually $500 of free, and I've got to try and find it. It might be faster to do it this way. There it is there. You can see an offer there for Bubble to get $500 of credit to use over 6 months. So once you created your apps, you could then activate that offer. You can't have a paid subscription before you activate that offer. You could activate that offer, and you would then have $500 worth of free credit for Bubble. As you can see, there are all sorts of tools here. So they have access to the AWS Activate program. You can get up to $5,000 in credits for Amazon Activate. If you've ever looked at Amazon AWS, you could get an awful lot out of $5,000. Now, the pricing to join, you can see here they have different ones are available on their free level, on their free tier. Some are available on their premium tier, and some are platinum, and they have different prices there. So $99 per year gets you access to the platinum deals, and that gets access to all of these things like $5,000 for AWS. A big one for me has been using Engage Bay, the CRM, where I would have cashed in now so they are 6 months free on their all-in-one plan. I've got 3 or 4 different businesses that have all used that same offer. So that's double my outlay for the year back already right there. So there is a link there if you want to have a look at Join Secret for yourself. It's not just app building. There's all sorts of amazing tools that you can use there. But obviously, keeping in mind that we are way over time, and there's certainly a lot more we could do with our little app even in that little time. Are there any other questions that anybody wants to ask or jump in? We'll probably stop playing around with the app there for now. We could play around for a lot longer, but we'll probably stop there for now given time. But do we have any other questions that anyone wants to ask? can we connect it with weblinks or Squarespace? You probably could. What you would generally do, depending on what the app you're trying to make, what you're trying to build is, you would probably use, you might create your main website in Squarespace, and then have, so your domain might be, ray.com, that goes to a Squarespace website, and then you might have app.ray.com that links to a Bubble app. And you could certainly use different API elements with all of the plugins we didn't even go near looking at today to make the two talk to each other really, really nicely. So yeah, you absolutely could connect it. It all comes down to the purpose, what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to make work. Lewis asks, is a day workshop opportunity? Absolutely. Good hackathon opportunity. As Albie asked about a funnels webinar, is that we can make that happen for sure. Are you talking about a platform like ClickFunnels, or actually building our own using something like Bubble? Oh, there we go. How to build it. Yep. We could absolutely look into how to build it. There is no shortage of things we could do. We've really, really, really only scratched the surface today. That was really, really quick and nasty. Yeah, we have really only scratched the surface of what you can do with a no-code tool. All right, so what we'll do, if we don't have any more questions, is I'll wrap it up because we are over time, and I'll send out some notes. I'll send out the slide deck, send out some notes, and actually send out some examples of how you could build this app yourself, so a little bit of a workbook that works you through the different elements of Bubble, along with links to one or two really great YouTubers that really go into in-depth how to make it work, which is sort of where I've really learnt a lot of what I've learnt to do with these tools. And if you want any other information, I'll just chuck my email here. By all means, I mean, I've put it in the data anyway, but by all means, feel free to send me an email and just ask for any particular information that you might want. Difference between a web app and a web page is Gordon's question. That's one I've wondered a bit too. So Gordon, a web page is basically like your standard website that you might go to, that shows your, if you're Agnes Water blockchain element, you might have a website that just gives people information, a bit like a glossy brochure sort of thing for Agnes Water blockchain, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas your web app would be what you might use to manage your membership site. You could connect it to, particularly with, blockchain and Bitcoin transactions. You could use it to actually handle your transactions, and actually run all of that things in the back end. Usually they're the kind of tools that would plug into your website. So if we use ClickFunnels as an example, which is the funnel building software that I mentioned earlier, we'll just go quickly to their website. And at clickfunnels.com, you'll see this is their web page. It's really just a landing page that tells you the information, tells you what they do, et cetera, et cetera. We've all seen a web page. So that's their website, their web page. If I click on the start a free trial now, that goes, you can see the domain changes to app.clickfunnels.com in their sign up sequence. So I've now gone into the actual web app as opposed to the web page. The web page tells me about ClickFunnels, whereas the web app is the tool that I use to build funnels and generate affiliates and all that kind of thing. With my own tool like Diabetes Dashboard, the web page, if we go back here to my apps, you can see there's a web page here that says watch this space for Diabetes Dashboard. That's a web page. The app in the background, and the web app is the actual tool that's pulling in the information from the continuous glucose monitors and turning that data into information for the person with diabetes and for their clinical team. It's the tool that one of the things we're doing in Diabetes Dashboard is a bit like Twitter, having a constant feed of information and updates backwards and forwards between. So it's the app that does that, whereas the web page basically just gives you the information about the tool. So probably a little bit of rambling there, but I hope that somewhat answered that question. Anything else before we wrap it up? And like I said, I'll follow up with that information. I might go back and do another ScreenFlow recording of how to go through the app, just to take out, obviously, this recording that we've got for today. We'll have a break in the middle where the computer froze up. So I might sit down maybe tomorrow and actually just record another quick run through of how we did it, so that you've got a bit more of a seamless video that we can upload and share. But other than that, by all means, send me an email if you've got any questions or queries, and we might wrap it on up. So a big thank you to everybody for coming, for hanging on, definitely for sticking around when it all froze up. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll talk again soon.